Good morning, everyone. I am so excited that we have this opportunity to get together for another one of our Narrative Change Committee sessions. And just to give a little backstory for those who aren't familiar with the Narrative Change Committee, the Narrative Change Committee is held underneath the MBK Chicago Alliance, as well as with the partnership with Public Narrative. I'm Jamira Alexander, the President and Executive Director of Public Narrative. And less than a year ago, we came together with Thrive Chicago to really ideate what a narrative change committee would look like. In forming this committee, we were very intentional about the folks we invited to be a part of this, simply because of their connection to community and their deep commitment to storytelling and really identifying how we can change the narrative for boys and young men of color in Chicago and allow for Chicago, of course, to be a model of what's possible across the country. So in doing so, we invited some very, very esteemed people to join us for a conversation, of course, back in November to talk about the way that Black and brown men were represented in the media. And we were really excited to learn a lot of things from them as far as how we change those narratives. You know, a lot of what is required of newsrooms in order to make that happen. But before I go any further, I want to, of course, introduce the folks who are a part of the Narrative Change Committee. And I'm just going to ask you all to popcorn to each other. So I'm going to start with Miss Brenda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brenda Williams. I am the president of Russell Williams Group, which is a brand consulting agency, and also the founder and creator of My GPS, which stands for My Guided Personal Story. And our focus in that work is to help young people aged 16 to 24 really understand that their power is their story and to be able to articulate it authentically and with confidence and understand that while skills are extremely important, your story is really what sets you apart from everyone else. And our work is really meant to make sure that the world clearly understands the whole person, not just what's on a resume, not just what you write in an essay to be able to get into college, but really be able to understand the whole person and that that human actually shows up fully for whatever they are doing academically, professionally, and personally.
Thank you, Brenda. Who you going to popcorn to?
I will pop to Zachary.
Hello, I'm Zachary George. I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I moved to Chicago where I received my bachelor's degree at Columbia College Chicago in film, cinema, art, and science. I'm now a graduate student studying remotely at Columbia as well in regards to civic media or media for social justice. And I'm working on my practicum in regards to media representation or groups and people of color who have been misrepresented in the media. And that's what I am passionate about, and I would like to convey to the public and encode my messages with that statement and sentiment in order to represent others within the media.
Thanks, Zachary. Who you popcorning to?
I shall popcorn to Miss Erica Bell.
Hi, my name is Erica Bell. I am the office coordinator for Public Narrative. I've had the privilege to join these conversations and to really get a better understanding as well as add some insight to this conversation around boys and young men of color. And I'm really happy to be here today.
And who you going to, Erica?
I'm gonna popcorn to Shelby.
Hi, I'm Shelby. I am an intern at Public Narrative since I believe we started in October. I go to Adler University in downtown Chicago, and I'm getting my master's in art therapy. And when Jamira was kind of introducing us to Public Narrative and the different sectors, public education really stuck out to me. I've worked in education for a couple years, and that's kind of where like my heart lies with working with young people. And, you know, I've seen the different just barriers that young people have, you know, in the education system. And I want to work to change that. So I'm happy to be here and to listen to all of you and all of your different perspectives. And I'll pass it to Blair.
Hello, my name is Blair Jackson, or I refer to myself as Blair I. Jackson. I am a director, and I am a sophomore at Butler College Prep. Uh, joined Public Narrative MBK, I think around June or July. And basically, my goal when it comes to directing is basically to expose the youth to certain things, as well as show my creativity. I do have a series called Lesson Learned, which will be published on April 20th. You can find on YouTube at 4417 Creations. Glad to be
All right. Brandon?
Hey everybody, Brandon Pope here. I'm a reporter and anchor at CW26 and WCIU. You can catch me on the Jam evening show at 6 p.m. I'm also a passionate member of the National Association of Black Journalists, both nationally and locally. I'm the current VP of broadcast, and I joined MBK and Public Narrative with the goal of um, highlighting our narratives and highlighting people of color, especially youth of color, and the stories that really shine a light on the good things they're doing. Really, narratives are really what change lives, and I think that's the work that we're really involved in here. So happy to be a part of it, and let's continue to fight.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everyone. You know, I recognize, and I'm sure you all do too, as committee members, recognize that a lot of what we're talking about doing is not done overnight. A lot of these issues we've inherited, and we found a way to overcome a lot of challenges. And as I listen to each of you and in working with you, I know that a lot of your work, you know, it results in what you've seen, and it results in what you've seen and know is possible. So I really appreciate you all bringing that to this space. I have to just kind of say, you know, and for those who don't know, that the efforts of MBK Chicago really started in looking at how to change that male educator pipeline among Black and brown men. And in looking at that, there's a complete plan, and we can include the link in the chat, but there's a complete plan around how to do that. But as we were talking about earlier, back in November when we held that panel, you know, around media representation, Chris Goins, the MBK Impact Leader, and I began to talk about, you know, what's next for this alliance. And so among our committee, you know, we talked, of course, about how do we engage media makers here in Chicago around telling our stories, and really in the process of developing a strategy that would allow us to dig deeper in that area and to see it manifest itself. So I'm gonna stop talking right now because I want to show you all a video. I don't know if you've seen this commercial, but this will really be like what our conversation will be centered around as it relates to the way that men are viewed in, or particularly Black men, are viewed in media.
If you think you know what happens next, ask yourself why. These are the Black stories we've been shown. A narrow view that limits our understanding. But there's so much more to see. The full picture of Black life. let's widen the screen so we can widen our view.
Thoughts?
OMG, right? Oh my God. I know exactly where my mind went when I saw the initial images, right? And I think they said it best. Let's widen the screen. You need to see the full spectrum, because those same images could come up in any culture. Same images could come up in any culture, but if you don't see a people holistically, or you just portray them in a specific light, that's what the world view is of them. I know many of us have even traveled, and I've gone places, and the impressions of, just Chicago itself. Oh, you're from the Capone City. You mean Al Capone? Like in way back when? I'm like, Chicago is so much more than Al Capone. But that's their view, that the image that they have portrayed. So imagine if they only show people of color in a specific way negatively, as if they are a burden to society as opposed to a contributor. And so I immediately, my eyes teared up, because I said, oh my God. And I know exactly what we were thinking, like, oh my God, single mother, or they're about to try and rob somebody. You hear what I'm saying? And we as Black people do that to ourselves, by the way. Okay, let's not just talk about others doing it. We do it to our own selves. But the idea that we all need to broaden and really see people holistically and not just marginalize them in a certain kind of way, I think that was so powerful. Excellent commercial. Love that. I'm gonna stop there. Excellent.
I think it's extremely relatable in terms of, just as a Black man, I feel like oftentimes the screen isn't widened when you look at me, right? I don't have anything that says my job title or what I do or anything like that, right? Um, I grew up like a lot of kids, and there were some issues at home and stuff like that. And I remember you would never eat, like you would look at me and never know, right? Like I shoplifted as a kid. I had some run-ins with the law, stuff like that. But that doesn't tell the whole story. You got to widen the frame and dig deeper, and also get to the root cause of some of this as well and address that. So I appreciate that message for sure. And there's something about just P&G in general, the work they do with their marketing and storytelling, I appreciate. But that right there, we always need to make sure we're widening the screen. I know my whole perspective when I'm doing TV is it's called broadcasting for a reason, not narrowcasting. You want to cast a wide net, be inclusive, and look at the entire picture, because we're so much more than one thing. You can catch me in Friday night in a do-rag, and that may make you think one thing altogether, right? But that doesn't tell the whole story. So yeah, I really appreciate the message of that.
So what I appreciate about it is not only offering up a broader lens to everyone, but also to ourselves, because we have to look inward. And we have to realize that sometimes we are swallowing and internalizing these bad images that have depicted us ourselves. And so for me, when it first opened up, the first thing I said, suspicion. I started going to the dark places, because that's what has been ingrained in me to understand and to believe. And of course, then I start getting a little hot under the collar, because I'm not liking where this is going, only to end up with a smile. But wouldn't it be interesting if we start from that place, as opposed to go to the other places? Because we have been, we've been taught to think of ourselves in not necessarily the most positive light. So that's number one. Number two, Brandon, to piggyback on what you said, Procter is, they're doing an extremely amazing job at trying to change narratives, not just for people of color, but for how women are depicted. You think about their Dove commercials and all of those other kinds of things. They came up with a great strategy for the Freedom Museum in Cincinnati for, really talking about slavery from, all walks of life. They've done a lot of really important work. And I think for businesses out there who might be listening to us, you need to understand that we are watching you and we are watching what it is that you put out there. And people are looking for allies in telling the right kinds of stories. And so, from a business marketing perspective, this is a smart move for the company. And it tells you something about what they value. And that translates into, I think bigger impact and business for them as well.
I wanted to echo, a similar sentiment as Miss Williams. Like I want media to start from, the good part, instead of leading up to, starting from the darkest of places or like the assumed dark places, and then, expounding upon what it is that, people of color or misrepresented communities are, about, and, the community members, lives and their experiences. That's what I really am passionate about in regards to, my practicum, because I started my practicum in regards to diversifying media in whole, or like in total. And my director, he was like, you have to narrow your focus. So I really want to do something in this vein. And that's what my project is about, in regards to opening, the eyes of the public and the media in regards to the messages that our minds have been cultivated to think, in these dark areas, or just these tropes that we see in the media, or like film, TV, music, and so on and so forth. I want to get, people who may have an oppositional view of change or this certain sentiment, and make them negotiated thinkers. And as I was saying a little earlier, encode the messages that I want to put in place in regards to my project and my later work, and help them see that that they can change as well. And I also published a children's book because when I was younger, I didn't see too many people of color within that realm. Like my favorite authors were like Walter Dean Myers, Saul Williams, etc. But they weren't like characters of color, back then. I was born in the early 90s and raised until now, but that's why I took that upon myself and wanted to bring that to light to help us you know deconstruct and debunk those things.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. Blair or Shelby?
I was just kind of reflecting on what Erica said, and I recently moved to Chicago for school, and I'm from Oregon. My mostly white family and friends all told me, be careful. And I was like, moving to Chicago, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure. And like, um, it just kind of hit me like recently what they kind of meant by that. And I was like, yeah, it's just, I don't know. Yeah. And same like what Zachary was just saying, like it was hard seeing me. I'm Asian, and seeing me in the media, whenever I saw an Asian character, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's, someone who looks like me. It's such a rare thing. And um, I want to see more stories of joy and success in the media. So yeah, that was a great correction.
I want to come back to that, Shelby, after we hear from Blair. Blair, you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Just some little bit of technical difficulties. um, so okay. So basically, um, I did smile after that commercial. It was very nice to see, honestly. Um, and the reasoning of that is because yes, we are black males. We are painted in a um, uh, very negatively within the media. I mean, of course, we're looked at as suspicious. We're looked at as criminals. We're looked at as um, quote unquote hoodlums or thugs or gangbangers and all these things when there's so much going on. think that this is kind of a quote unquote woke commercial, if you would say, because it's almost like we could like we could kind of make this relate to police brutality when these people, um, when the police in particular start to shoot innocent Black boys, Black girls, they don't see what we see. They don't see the positivity. They don't see that this person has a family to go to. They don't see that this is possibly a positive mentor. They don't see that this is a person who contributes to his community. They don't see that greatness. They don't see that. So to see this was very nice as a Black person, knowing this already, but other races, almost an eye opener for those who have painted us negatively. And honestly, it was a nice commercial to see. I haven't really seen anything like that, and I try to spread that in my art as soon as possible or as much as I can. So honestly, it was nice to see.
Yeah. I have to say, when it opened up, I watched it last night. And when it opened up, I immediately thought Menace to Society. It reminded me of the scene in the store. And watching it unfold, it just filled my heart with so much joy. Like, finally, somebody somewhere is listening, to recognize that simply putting out a statement, simply donating, or whatever the case, like, there has to be a complete package. So, the marketing powers that be, the executive leaders that be, they're listening, they're paying attention. And to see that, I want to be careful to not label it as what we've seen before, because really, I don't think I've ever seen anything as powerful to have made such a powerful statement. And certainly during this time where, like Derek Chauvin on trial, like right here, right now, opening statements happening today, like in all these things that we're challenged with processing. And this is why I want to come back to Shelby's statement, particularly about joy. We had an event on Saturday, and one of the participants in the event made mention of wanting to focus on Black joy as a form of resistance. And I hear that loud and clear, and also recognize that there's a lot of context that has to be, unpacked for people. But I recognize that we, as the ones who live it every day, don't have to be the ones to do the unpacking. It's like putting those messages, putting those things in the forefront for people to understand and really grasp, and then identify for themselves what they can do in their respective places of authority and spheres of life. So what are you all's thoughts about that? And not just Black joy, but even as we've seen with the shooting in ATL, Asian joy, just joy, period, across the board. Like, how do you all see joy as a form of resistance?
I see it as a form of resistance because in regards to the media, we see a lot of trauma with in regards to people of color and others as well. Not just Black people or African Americans, meaning our Asian brothers and sisters, our Hispanic brothers and sisters, but just trauma. So if we're seeing joy, that's our form of opposition to the trauma that we've been experiencing. We're letting the world know that you cannot oppress us in regards to keeping us in this exhausted state of sadness and despair in regards to the things that we're seeing in the media, like the cultivation that 24-hour cycle of just bad news, and not just bad news as in bad reporting or anything like that, but bad news as in like unfortunate circumstances, violence and things of that nature. So, I'd see that as, us being joyful, happy, and celebrating ourselves and each other as, resisting the negative status quo, if that makes sense.
So I guess I have a question. I don't really have a thought on this, but unfortunately, the negativity and the trauma and the drama is what sells papers, is what gets looks, it's what people have become interested in. And so my question is, of course, we want to celebrate Black joy. And I'm thinking about it from a media perspective in terms of what does that do in terms of the job people have to do, where ratings and, all of those kinds of things make such a big difference. And we as a society have become, I don't know, like we're addicted to it. We're addicted to the stuff that's not so good. So while I see it as certainly a form of personal resistance, so absolutely, I'm wondering how you scale it and how you make it something that is really going to be able to make the kind of impact, because it goes against all that sells right now. It's a question.
I got some thoughts, but anybody else have any thoughts on that question?
Well, I think you could take it when it comes to like how we eat, right? We're so used to eating junk food that when you get healthy food, you kind of like, well, it doesn't taste good to me. And you almost have to wean yourself off of the junk onto the good food. And if you go through like a 5-day cleanse, if you call it that, where you don't, maybe even 10 days, where you're not eating the junk and all that. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced that, but after you come off that 10-day and you go back to like that Snickers or that peanut M&Ms, they don't even taste good. It's like you don't even have an appetite for it anymore.
Body doesn't respond the same.
It doesn't, but you realize how the taste wasn't what you thought it was. It was just an addiction. And so I think that a part of what we have to do as changing the narrative is really work on healthy habits around narratives as it pertains to all people, not just people of color. But I think if we can start weaving that into, and we can start balancing that out so people have an appetite for healthy, positive news that's uplifting and encouraging people. Because every community is going through something, right? Every community is dealing with challenges. And I think if we can, at the base beginning, understand that we are all human, that we are all here together. There are differences among us, but we must at least understand and come to the agreement that we are all humans. And if you don't see me as a human being, if you don't see me as a person who, that's a challenge. If we can't define things correctly, we don't have a base definition of what a human is or a person is, because, you think about slavery, we weren't considered people, we were considered property. So they had to change that narrative, that definition. So you think about the definitions, and then you think about creating those healthy environments for people to have an appetite for and to not tolerate this negative images that can be put out there. I mean, but that's, like you said, this is a marathon work, right? This is not a 100-meter dash work. Yeah. And it takes time. And this is an inner work with each one of us. This is not, all these outer things can influence us, but each individual person, I don't care the most militant or the most racist or wherever you fall on that spectrum, until we decide one thought at a time, one decision at a time, that I'm no longer going to feed into these negative things that impact our society in such a way that it tears us down as opposed to lifting us up. And understanding that there's plenty of room for everybody and everything that you want to do. There is no lack, there is no limitation. But I think we put that out there, which creates fear, creates this, oh, I gotta, it feeds into that. So we have to stop feeding that. There's a statement that says where focus goes, energy flows. And so let's put our focus in the right direction. And I believe that we can get the momentum that we need, one person, one thought at a time, one generation at a time, and we can bring about that change that we want to see.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was just going to add, when I think about Black joy, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Silver Room Block Party in Hyde Park. If anyone's ever been to that, yeah. That is the ultimate Black joy celebration to me. It's a beautiful thing, truly, and I miss it because you have all these beautiful people, not just Black people, but it's mostly Black, of all colors, but beautiful Black people smiling, dancing, joyous, collaborating, sharing their business, contributing to Black business, and just being happy. There's no drama. There's nothing popping off. It's just a safe space overall. And so, you know, one of my pet peeves is misquoting people. So I'm hoping I'm not misquoting Frederick Douglass here. But I believe he said that pessimism is a tool of white supremacy or something like that. And when you think about that, if we are down on ourselves as a people, if we are, have our heads hanging low, then, business doesn't happen, those festivals don't happen, the economic drivers don't happen, the creativity doesn't happen. Like Black joy truly ignites something in us. And so when I think about it being a tool against white supremacy and a tool for liberation, that's what I think. It ignites something within ourselves and we bring that together collectively to do a collective work. So Black joy is beautiful. And I love that idea of Black joy being resistant. It's not something I've thought about a lot, but like just hearing it, it's a really awesome thought. It really is.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. As Erica was talking, I was thinking, the people hold the value system. So we're talking about shifting, what we place value in. Yes, we've seen the negative stories sell and that be the economic driver. But I think we're living in a time, particularly with social media, where we have access to information like no other generation has before us. And the information, we're inundated with all sorts of stories and experiences, but it's a matter of what we feed into. It's a matter of what we follow. It's a matter of what we share, what we like. And I think that businesses, for certain companies, corporations are really catching on to that, as seen in, gravitating towards social media influencers who have built the following for themselves. So in all of that, I think that the people hold the value in what we say goes, to the extent of how we demonstrate that. I think to a lot of that, a lot of change, like getting to a place where we begin to see this one and the same. I'm not so optimistic towards that, because I think a lot of it is rooted in belief. And I say that because among an ethnicity or race, perhaps, but among all races, I think it is limited to beliefs and culturally what you believe and what you come from. And I think we really need those. I don't want to say advocates is not the word, but I think we need those accomplices and those allies who then are really about, and they understand, not even just being about it. They understand, like, what the whole goal and intention of something is, and that it's not simply a marketing campaign, or it's not simply for advertising purposes, but this actually has an impact on people's lives. So I think that, the P&G commercial is a step in, definitely a step in the right direction. But I think that there's a lot of momentum to be built around that kind of storytelling from that stage. And, I hate to bring this up, but we've seen several missed opportunities, and the one that I'm thinking of primarily is like all the whole fallout with the NFL. With Colin Kaepernick, like we've seen missed opportunities where folks have had stages where they could, really get behind a cause and do something with it, but a lot of times, because people don't believe that there's liberation for us all in supporting Black and Brown people, then what am I in danger of losing if I sign on to this? Not realizing that, you may not be in danger of losing anything. In fact, it could be the very thing that, sets a new trend that ultimately becomes a new way of life for many people, to include the people that you immediately influence. So I think it's important to realize that, like, even as things are scaled and reputations are built and businesses are cultivated and communities are ultimately impacted by all of these things, I think it's important to not minimize the impact of the platform, the impact of the influence. And I think that corporations, of course, have tapped into that for sure. But I think that we as people are tapping into our ability to leverage and scale what we know in order to come in and make sustainable change. So my next, anybody else want to add anything to that before I get to my next question? So I am not a lover of statements. And I've had this conversation with my team, like, time and again, particularly after something major happens. I'm not a lover of statements. I personally think that statements are almost like a plea, don't take your dollars from us, if there's no true action behind it. We've seen companies like Ben and Jerry, like, step up and like really run with it, right? So a statement doesn't feel quite like a statement from them because they put it into their products and their goods. But not everyone that releases a statement has that direct impact connected back. So I'm interested in you all's perspectives on statements, like when travesties happen in the country and folks began releasing statements of all the folks that they stand with.
Well, I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, if you're going to be about it, right? It can't just be in word, it must be in deed as well. And I think, there's this sentiment, this wave that's out here right now of, equality and inclusion. And as I look historically over the cycles that we kind of repeat over time, I ask myself, how different will this time be, right? And we've made changes and there's, we've progressed and things have moved, but you do get tired of kind of historically hearing some of the same cycles. I think about John Lewis, and they had words of him when he was on the Pettus Bridge back in the 60s, having this statement. And it's literally, he needs to say those same words today. It's insane that we keep having these same revolutions. And it's kind of like, why can't we ever just get over the hurdle and keep going, right? We kind of have to still, it's like, we haven't quite gotten to the root of these issues, right? But when it comes to the whole statement piece, to me, the real testament is, let me see what your actions show, right? You can make these statements and hey, thank you for the money. But if it's platitude, if it's surface, if it's not really genuine locking arms, and I like the word of accomplices, because you're just as guilty as I am. You understand what I'm saying? You're in this as deeply as I am. That's what you're looking for, and time will tell, right? Is this just a fad? Is this just a trend? Or is this going to fade into the woodwork and people are going to go back to doing what they're doing? Hopefully not. I hope that the generations that are coming, that are yet coming forward, we talk about the younger people, our generation as well. Hopefully we will continue this momentum, and that it won't just be words, but we will actually be able to show the proof, right? And the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in, okay, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what change have we really seen in terms of the narrative? What impact has really happened from all that has transpired over these last 12 months? That's where the real testament's going to be. And we only can wait and see, right? But hopefully as the leadership changes, right, as we continue to have newer leaders come in across the spectrum, right, at all levels of government, with corporations, et cetera, hopefully they're bringing their impassioned voice of change with them. And so we'll see over time. But I too am like, let me just see, let's wait and see. Because you don't know, right? You just don't know.
I agree. Lately, I've been seeing the political, seeing the political atmosphere that we're living in. I'm becoming more of a believer of actions speak louder than words. I'm not necessarily a fan of statements also, because I feel that statements are just words. Words usually mean something when there's action applied to it. But now we're also living in a time where sometimes action doesn't mean a lot of things. Being doing equality or being about equality has become a trend, and usually trends die. So since we know that, it's really hard to kind of be on either other, like, it's kind of hard to be on any side, honestly, when it comes to statements or not. So I kind of agree with Miss Bell, everything. Yeah.
Thanks, Blair.
Well, I
Okay.
kind of think that it's incumbent on us, each of us, to make. Hold on, my phone's ringing. Sorry about that.
Zachary, were you going to say something?
Oh, right. I was just gonna, echo similar sentiments. I'm not the biggest on statements either. I feel like statements are basically band-aids or gauze to, staunch what issues may have been presented or ongoing issues. Sometimes I feel like when statements are made, they're, even when they're coupled with action, they can still be hollow. Action and statements together, like, a hollow form of, right, platitude. They're just trying to offer us something in order to, stop our voices for that time being. Like, okay, here you go. I'm just gonna, give you that, and hopefully you don't, make any more noise or try to resist. And so if it's not, genuine action, genuine care or concern, or, genuine change, it really doesn't amount to much in regards to, alleviating, ongoing things that people are suffering from.
I was going to say that I believe that it's incumbent on each of us to make words mean something. I'm not going to say that I don't believe in statements. I think that people, companies, even as a parent, I make statements. I have to say stuff and say what it is that I am standing for. And I think it's incumbent on us to make that, though, mean something in action. To everybody's point, diversity, equality, and inclusion, those are the words of the day. Those are the words du jour. And in my work, a lot of corporations are going back and looking at their value statements now, because they realize, hey, wait a minute, it's got to be more than collaboration. We've forgotten some things since COVID and George Floyd and all of these other things. And you're right. It's like this is the urgency of the moment, to make sure that you are saying that you represent all of humanity, is like the thing that people are doing. But for me as a business person, it is important to hold those organizations accountable for what they say that they're going to be about. So my question is, okay, if diversity, equality, inclusion is what you're about, how does that translate into your processes? How does that translate into how you reward people? How does that translate into your performance evaluations? How does that perform? And boy, then that's when the eyes really open up, because there are consequences to your words. There are consequences to your statements. And that is what I think we who are very conscious about all this, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that people live whatever their statements are about. I do believe that words heal. I think they can be healing, but words without action, absolutely not. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but what I am saying is that we got to bring them both together and make sure that there is fervent action behind whatever the words are, whatever is spoken. Because at the end of the day, our speaking, our conversation, our statements is where this process of change begins. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. No, that's very powerful, Brenda. Thank you for that. And it led me to really kind of balance it, right? So we're in the midst of cancel culture where if an organization is not really about, equality and inclusion, then oftentimes they're called out and then there are other consequences that they suffer. But how do we balance this where, say you have a company, like you said, like, they recognize, oh, we need to go back and reassess our value statement because there are some things we missed. But in that true acknowledgement, do they still, or even should they still fall subject to cancel culture when they've acknowledged that they haven't always done things appropriately? You know, what are you all's thoughts on that?
Um, that's actually a very good question. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, if they're acknowledging that they haven't done the best, within the past, they're accepting responsibility that they need to change. And so, if they're accepting responsibility and, actually being genuine and would like to change and, they're doing things and putting things in place in order to achieve that goal, I don't think they should be quote unquote canceled as long as that action is being shown.
I like to call it accountability culture because that's really what it's about, is making sure that people are being held accountable. Um, so I'm okay with people, having demands and expecting better of businesses that they frequent or brands or anything that they want to be a part of, because brands have voices, they have power. The biggest power they have is economic. They have hiring power. And if you can look at their roster for their board of directors, or even just look at their, how they pay their employees or different practices with that, you can see where their values truly lie. Um,
That's
you're
right.
seeing a reckoning going on right now with Amazon and some other companies about how they treat their own employees. They're holding them accountable. I think that's great, not just for the country but also for business. And I think it's great for overall leverage and raising wages and just everybody's economic freedom as well.
Yeah. I love, oh, go ahead, Brenda.
I'm good.
Okay. I love that about accountability culture. I do. I think that a lot more to shift in that direction, I think a lot more organizations and companies would focus more so on being more accountable. If the fear of the cancel culture was not there, I think that, it's not a matter of folks not wanting to do it. I think it might very well be that they can't afford a crisis, quite frankly, and not knowing what that fallout might look like. There's so much to take into account that in your risk management, it's just like it may be better not to even address it, and that only continues to do additional harm. So,
And sometimes some of the crises they run into can easily be resolved by just talking to a
yes,
person of color.
totally,
Like you see
totally,
some of these brands, they tweet out something, they get in trouble for it. It's like, well, any black person that works for you probably would have told you not a good idea, but for
yeah,
some reason, like,
yeah,
hey, no,
totally,
exactly. So, some of this just comes down to the basics, right?
yeah,
Hire a black person, hire a person of color. When we're talking about the wave of hate against the AAPI community, like, do you have Asian voices in the room?
mhm,
If you don't, then you're not really doing what you need to be doing
exactly.
for the community.
Exactly. It has everything to do with cultivating that environment. Even if you have Black people or people of color on your team, have you cultivated an environment where they feel safe to share, give their perspective without any threat of retaliation? And oftentimes that's not the case because we don't know how to cultivate those kind of environments. Once worked for this is when I lived on the East Coast. Once worked for a organization that you were frowned upon if you served the people you served like with compassion, and you were considered to have had a bleeding heart. And it's just like, well, how in the world you think I'm supposed to get the work done? These people got to open up to me And if I don't show them compassion, I don't have access to their story. I have to treat them as a human being if I'm going to serve them and deliver, what we're called to deliver. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the service industry, in a lot of instances. And I think we see that, unfold even as we see community policing go up in smoke often. There's a lot of, there's not a clear, we don't share a clear definition of what it's like to do our jobs well or conduct business and serve people. And we don't do that well. We don't do that well. And I think it all lies in the value system. I don't know if you all are familiar with the woman. Her name is Dr. Joy DeGruy. She has done a study on post-traumatic slave syndrome. And one of the elements of her study talks about axiology and really like how ethnically what we each gravitate towards. And so there's a quote that she makes mention of in her book about how the highest value lies in a relationship. And a lot of times, if we as people of color, in many instances, all we've had have been relationships. And in being able to cultivate those relationships and see growth in those relationships have been what has helped to get us by. And with there being more for like white Americans, with there being more of a focus on time, and we don't have a whole lot of time to get this done, the value is not the same, amongst all of us. And I don't know that we ever get to that same wavelength, but I think that there has to be a respect for what one values over another. In other situations I've run into experiences where I had to really balance what's coming up right now. Is this a business indifference or is this a cultural indifference? And if it's the latter, then there's a whole nother way that I need to move. But if it's a business indifference, there's a whole nother way that I need to move and flow. And I think that we're each responsible for learning those ebbs and flows, but also like creating space for ourselves even, in being, voices of change, but, not minimizing who we are and what we bring to the table. I think this gets back to like, the earlier question about leveraging joy as resistance, how to, leverage the best of our experiences for introducing people to what they may be a little frightened of accepting. And I'm really grateful that P&G took the time to step outside of the traditional box. Now, this is something that I hope happens because, you have these companies who are competitors, and oftentimes they try to one up each other. So I'm hoping that the spirit of competition serves us in this way, but serves us in a way that it can continue to educate people around the things that they may be ignorant of. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, the only one thing that occurs to me is that if we also have to give credit to that which we think is going in the right direction, because people don't often know, is this the right way? We're trying. And so to your point around P&G and what they are doing, for us as communicators and business people in the media, we have to hold that up and lift that up so that people understand where in the conversation or where in the narrative we need to be going. Because if our silence is just, 7 people on a call who think we've got a great commercial on television and it goes nowhere further than that, then we have missed an opportunity. So for each of us, I think we have to go up there and say, hey, you know what? This organization is doing a pretty good job. This is a great narrative for, Black men. This is something you need to pay attention to. That's how people learn. That's how change happens. We have to communicate what's right exponentially.
And I would agree that we have to continue to educate ourselves. I think, African Americans they've been aware of white culture for such a long time that if I remember in the early 90s, I went to a Bible school in Texas, and I remember meeting some of my classmates who had never, they come from a small white rural town and had not really been around Black people. And so their experience, it was a great exchange because they realized, you know, that Black people weren't just how they were portrayed in these images on TV. Then catapult, graduate. I have an Asian friend that I met at the Bible school. He was from California. He came to visit Chicago a couple of years after we graduated. And when he came to visit me and my family on the south side of Chicago, Korean guy, really cool. He was like, he told me after, like, we were getting ready to wrap up his visit and everything, he said, he leaned on me, he said, you know, I thought Black people were like the Cosby family, like all, you know, and I was like, no, that's just one view of Black people. But it was interesting because he had this image of the Cosby family as representative of Black America. And so I say that to say that we must continue to show the different images, right? We must portray those images. But ultimately, we have to continue to learn and widen the screen because, no, you know, if you put people in a box, you know, nobody likes to be put in a box individually. Imagine a culture of people. This is all you are. This is all you were. And so we have to make sure that we continue to spread the word, right? Continue to learn and then be learners ourselves, right? And not limit ourselves in our view of people, even white people. Hello, and I mean it in a general term, right? I don't mean it like all white people, but idea of white people not liking Black people. Some of us have to broaden our perspective on that. That is not all white people. You understand what I'm saying? And so just remain open to people changing. Because here's the other thing: if people change, we have to be ready for them to change.
That's right.
And remember, when we're asking for stuff, it cuts both ways.
That's right.
If you want them to change, you got to be ready for the change. Because if you're not, you'll receive it incorrectly. And then you can damage the advancement that was just about to happen because you don't know how to forgive. You understand what I'm saying? And then let's move on from here. So that's, you know, that would be my final statement, but you know.
I appreciate that, Erica. If you would drop your Cash App in the Cash App handle in the chat, so we can send you an offering. You preaching this morning. Listen, I thank you all for taking the time, of course, with our committee. If there are any final thoughts, you're more than welcome to share. But of course, we'll be back together in another 2 weeks where we'll have another dialogue that will, of course, complement the work that we're doing within the MBK Action Team. Anyone else? All right, you all have a great week.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Great conversation.
See you guys.
Peace.